Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels and to the Fifth Trooper podcast.
Welcome to a special edition in the Notorious Scoundrels and the Fifth Trooper podcasts. This is the State of the Legion address. My name is Michael Berry, and I am joined today by Kyle Dornbos, David Zelenka, and Jay Shalansky. We'd like to start today with an excerpt from Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith novelization. Across the remnants of the Republic, stunned beings watch in horror as the battle unfolds live on the HoloNet. Everyone knows the war has been going badly. Everyone knows that more Jedi are killed or captured every day, that the Grand Army of the Republic has been pushed out of system after system. But this, a strike at the very heart of the Republic, an invasion of Coruscant itself. How can this happen? It's a nightmare, and no one can wake up. Because they know that what they're watching, live on the HoloNet, is the death of the Republic. Many among these beings break into tears. Many more reach out to comfort their husbands or wives, their creechmates or kin triads, and their younglings of all descriptions, from children to cubs to spawn fry. Here's a strange thing. Few of the younglings need comfort. It is instead the younglings who offer comfort to their elders. Across the Republic, in words or pheromones, in magnetic pulses, tentacle braids, or mental telepathy, the message from the younglings is the same. Don't worry, it'll be all right. Anakin and Obi-Wan will be there any minute. All the younglings watching the battle in Coruscant sky know it. When Anakin and Obi-Wan get there, those dirty Seppers are going to wish they'd stayed in bed today. The adults know better, of course. That's part of what being a grown-up is. Understanding that heroes are created by the HoloNet, and that the real-life Kenobi and Skywalker are only human beings after all. Even if they really are everything the legends say they are. Who's to say they'll show up in time? Who knows where they are right now? They might be trapped on some separatist backwater. They might be captured, or wounded, even dead. Some of the adults even whisper to themselves, they might have fallen. The adults know that legendary heroes are merely legends, and not heroes at all. These adults can take no comfort from their younglings. Palpatine is captured. Grievous will escape. The Republic will fall. No mere human beings can turn this tide. No mere human beings would even try. Not even Kenobi and Skywalker. And so it is that these adults across the galaxy watch the HoloNet with ashes where their hearts should be. Ashes because they can't see two prismatic bursts of real space reversion far out beyond the planet's gravity well. Because they can't see a pair of starfighters crisply jettison hyperdrive rings and streak into the storm of Separatist Vulture fighters with all guns blazing. A pair of starfighters, Jedi starfighters. Only two. Two is enough. Two is enough because the adults are wrong and their younglings are right. Though this is the end of the Age of Heroes, it has saved its best for last. Similar to the Clone Wars, this year has also saved the best for last. As our concluding episode of Year 1 of Star Wars Legion, we'll take a trip back in time to a galaxy not so far, far away, and a trip forward to wherever the galaxy may be taken. A year ago, at Adepticon 2018, Fantasy Flight Games, led by game designer Alex Davy, released Star Wars Legion, a tabletop war game that we have all come to know and love. It released with Luke Skywalker, Rebel Troopers, AT-RTs, Snow Speeders, AT-STs, Speeder Bikes, Stormtroopers, and Darth Vader, the Dark Lord of the Sith himself. Shortly thereafter, we experienced releases on a monthly basis. We got Leia Organa, Fleet Troopers, General Veers, Snow Troopers from Hoth, Han Solo, Rebel Commandos from Endor, the Bounty Hunter Boba Fett, Scout Troopers, Han's companion Chewbacca, Wookiee warriors that weren't even in the original trilogy that we got from the prequels. We got Emperor Palpatine in combat form himself. We got his Imperial Royal Guard. We got FD blaster turrets, along with E-Web blasters. We got Imperial Specialists and Rebel Specialist packs. We got Priority Supplies, which gave us more objectives. We got Jyn Erso from Rogue One, along with her trusty Pathfinders. We got Director Krennic and Death Troopers. And soon enough, we're going to get the X-34 Landspeeder, the Occupier Assault Tank, Rebel Veterans, Tauntauns, Shore Troopers, and Dewbacks. And last, but certainly not least, we got the Barricadas expansion, made famous by none other than the Legion Outriders. All of this took place in the time span of the last year, with the help of Alex's Legion partner in crime, Luke Eddy. Fantasy Flight churned out a startling amount of content and support for our game. Turning to the present day, at Adepticon 2019, we saw the first fully fledged genesis of this amazing game in its release schedule. 64 players battled it out in the last chance qualifier for spots at the High Command Invitation. Then, 32 players that had qualified from the inaugural Year of Legion battled it out for spots at Worlds at High Command. Now, only 8 remain, and they're going to battle at Worlds in a few months' time. Almost every unit that was released was seen on the table during these events in full glory. Diverse and creative strategies have sprung up amongst the tried and true, and now we get to reflect on everything that has occurred over this amazing year. We'll be splitting this episode into 2 parts, and for the first part, we thought we'd bring in the Dark Lords of the Sith. In the words of Master Yoda, always 2 there are, no more, no less. So we've got Alex and Luke here, Alex Davy and Luke Eddy from Fantasy Flight Games. First off, I kind of want to get you guys to introduce yourselves, just because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are probably super pumped about the Clone Wars announcements and might just be jumping into the game for the first time. So could you guys just kind of introduce yourselves and give us a little bit about who you are, your background at FFG, and what you do on a daily basis?
Go for it, Alex.
Oh, sure. So I am Alex Davy. I designed the game, and I've been with FFG for almost 7 years now, I want to say. And yeah, I've been in the minis department for most of that time. So I've had my hand in X-Wing and Armada and now Legion. I'm all about those Star Wars. How about you, Luke?
Oh, me? Well, let's see. I've been at the studio for... 2 years now?
I think so.
Yeah. Worked a bit longer at FFG's flagship game store. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I've been on Legion the whole time, but I feel like I've had small helping hand in certain other Star Wars properties that we work on. But I don't know. I played FFG games for a long time. Played a lot of their card games. Did a lot of playtesting for those.
Ran a lot of nets.
Yes, ran the hell out of those nets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know. I think that's me.
So yeah, we're basically a dynamic war game designing duo. Mm-hmm. Basically the dream team, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I kind of see you guys as the Sith Lords behind the game a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, really?
So Luke eventually is going to betray and destroy me.
I was hoping you wouldn't. You wouldn't.
That's what he told us in our interview before.
Damn, I knew I should have listened to your podcast.
Right?
It's not that good. Don't worry.
It's your own fault. It's your own fault.
So I have that to look forward to, but hopefully we get some good years of Legion designing.
Oh first. Yeah, no, we've got a ways to go first. Don't worry about it.
at least 3 or 4, right?
Yeah.
Sweet. So we've been focusing a lot on the podcast up to this point about Legion and how the last year has gone. So I was interested to know how did Legion come to be a thing? When I first got into minis games, the one thing I wanted to do was have my dude with a laser gun also have a laser sword, and because like Star Wars is awesome, but like I had to spend 20 years before you guys, finally came up with
We're
it.
sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. What was there like a trigger that happened that, you know, kind of just catalyzed that, or was it just something you guys came up with?
Well, I think I can speak to this just a little bit because I remember when we first introduced the game, we had a series of videos that we shot, sort of talking about it. That pretty nice videos, and the head of FFG, Andrew Navarro, talked a little bit about how I don't know, it's something we always wanted to do as a company, but we needed just to get to the right place where we knew we could do it justice, I guess.
It had some sort of minis game had been kicked around for a while. I know that there were certain iterations here and there, some sort of more traditional video game, or miniatures game. But I think it just sort of required us to, I don't know, like accrue enough hobby focused nerds in one room.
Well, and maybe I think to garner enough experience on sort of minis games light, so to speak.
Yeah, I think X-Wing paved the way. I mean, I think that was such a big hit that it just was sort of the natural next step to eventually do a full hobby mini game. We just had to get there in terms of bandwidth and capability and expertise and all that stuff.
Sculpting wise.
Sculpting,
yeah. We had to get our sculpting department had to be in a place where they could handle some. I mean, like X-Wing ships, we do great X-Wing ships. Bashley does an amazing job. But like, I mean, all the X-Wing ships are one person doing them.
Yeah, true.
And he does very, very good, like,
it was two for a while, but it's been pretty much one.
So
for the bulk of the game.
I mean, as we did more and more board games with miniatures, I think we expanded our sculpting department more and sort of hit a point where like, all right, we could tackle an actual miniatures game that's not just like hard surfaces like ships and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a whole different skill set to sculpt organic shapes versus planes, essentially, in angles. But I think for me, it was something that I wanted to do for a really long time. I was thrilled when I was given the project. I think they could have gone with a lot of the talented people at the company, but I think I probably had the most miniatures game experience at the point at which I was given the gig, and I was super thrilled because a lot of what brought me into miniatures gaming in the first place was all the hobby stuff. So the idea of being able to do a hobby-focused game set in a Star Wars universe, I mean, I wanted that as much as anybody out there, just the idea of having those miniatures to paint and build up. And every time I see a new product announced, I just get excited because it looks so good, and I will eventually get to hold it and paint it myself. So that's a big part of what's exciting about it for me. Yeah, I think it was just time. I think it was always something we wanted to do, and everything finally lined up for it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you did, almost all of it. You're by yourself.
Yeah, that's actually true.
When I was brought on, I think when I was like officially hired, I think the first thing you said to me was like, "Please help me with this Star Wars game."
I think it might have just been, "Please help me" at that point. Like, I was so tired. It was an endeavor. It was a crazy year because at the same time we were doing, not exactly the same time, but there's
one after the other,
huge amount of overlap with X-Wing Second Edition, which I also really wanted to be involved in and was. So that was quite the year for me. But then Luke came in at the last 3 or so months of development, I want to say.
Yeah, I don't think it was quite 3, but yes.
But you helped me take it over the finish line because I was just about burned out at that point, and it was just nice to have some backup.
It was pretty much done. It was just
almost done.
There was a lot of substantive tweaks.
Yeah,
at the end there.
But that was once we had the core rule set, ever since then it's been pretty smooth sailing in terms of expansions and where we want the game to head. So yeah, it's been a real partnership ever since the kind of core game got locked into place, which has been really nice.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I mean, you had worked on the core set and then what we referred to as Wave 1, which was the airspeeder, the ATST, Veers, Leia, Fleet Troopers, and Snow Troopers.
Yep.
All of those were worked on simultaneously along with the core set.
Yeah.
And when those wrapped up, you basically switched to X-Wing.
That's
And
right, I did.
All
didn't
right,
I?
I'll design Han Solo and Boba Fett and
That's true.
and the commandos and the scout
Yep.
troopers and all that. So
Yep.
so there's, it worked out all right. Came in clutch time basically.
Yeah, and we've needed pretty much almost 2 full-time people on the game ever since because it's been just full speed ahead. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have released so much in this first year. It's really.
Tell us about it.
I mean, like, at this point, we've talked a bit about it on the cast, but it's just, as I was like listing out all of the units that you guys have like released or previewed at this point, it's an insane amount of stuff to pack in 1 year.
Yeah, from every standpoint, from a development standpoint, from a sculpting, graphic design, art, all of that stuff. But I think one thing that we realized as a company that I think was really smart is that a game like Legion needs a ton of support right out of the gate because it needs to feel fully realized. It needs to give you an idea of the kind of really amazing stuff you can do if you collect a whole army and play with it. So I think it needed that injection of rapid content to get good momentum behind it. And I think it paid off, like having seen what the turnout was at Adepticon and how into it people were and how much work people had put into their armies and terrain and all that stuff. I think that having a kind of blitzkrieg release schedule has been really good for the initial push of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an amazing turnout at LVO too. That was
fun. Totally. I was not there, but I saw pictures and I heard it went really well.
It was fantastic. So we've had like this really crazy release schedule. How are you guys feeling? Like, has Legion outperformed your guys' expectations? Is it what you thought would it be? Is it what you thought it would be? Like,
I don't know.
Where do you feel like the game is?
I don't know. I think we always had high expectations. I think it has outperformed them a bit.
I would say so, just in terms of the community enthusiasm. I mean, like, it's not very often that you have a game that is barely a year old have the kind of support and excitement that we saw at Adepticon. So I would say, I mean, honestly, though, the second this game was released, it started outperforming my expectations because when it came out at the previous Adepticon a little over a year ago, what blew my mind is they had a build and play tournament where people literally got their pre-ordered Legion product, built a core set and some expansions, and immediately played a full 800-point tournament. Yeah. Like literally 2 hours after the game got released. So I think that as soon as I saw that happening, I was like, oh, this game's going to do fine. Like, if there's that much pent-up excitement for this kind of game in the Star Wars galaxy, I was like, okay, this is going to be just fine. Yeah, and it has been. It's been really great. It's been exciting to see how much it's grown in such a short time.
Yeah, I would echo that too. Like, more than anything, it's the community that has blown me away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really a positive community, and like so many people are putting so much work into blogs and podcasts.
And terrain tables, painting, organizing. There's been numerous independent campaigns and leagues started. I mean, people are just taking the ball and running with it, which I think is great because I have always seen Legion as kind of this toolbox that lets you sort of live out whatever sort of Star Wars experience you want. Like, I think custom game modes, scenarios, linked games, like there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with the fairly simple rule set for terrain and for units that I've provided. So it's cool to see people get creative with that, and it's just cool to see people get really into the tournament side of things too.
Yeah.
So with all that, I guess this is a 2-point question. Number one, what has been your favorite thing watching the community develop? And then what has been the most surprising thing that developed in the community?
Let me think about that. I guess I would say not surprising necessarily, but maybe a little surprising from the community. I would say, yeah, okay. So I would say the most surprising thing from the community has just been the level of some of the terrain that's been built for this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like people have, and I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised because Star Wars is such a, honestly, hobby focused fandom. You've got cosplay and detailed diorama making and action figures. And like, that's been part of Star Wars fandom since the go. So in a way that this game is kind of a natural fit for that, because people who are already interested in that kind of creative expression can now, build whole like battle boards and display boards and all kinds of stuff that fit with the minis we're releasing. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised by how much creativity and stuff there's been out there, but some of it just blew me away. Like there's a HVC workshop did like a whole Jeddah table.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
That is mind blowing. I mean, it looks like the movie set. You could probably film some scenes on there using it as like a bigature. I mean, that's like, to me, that seemed like almost Weta Workshop level bigature work. And that was really cool. But like great armies, the terrain at Adepticon was phenomenal. There's been a lot of creativity with, 3D printing and people home building all kinds of custom stuff using old Kenner toys. Yeah. It's like all kinds of creative stuff out there.
Yeah. Well, and I would say sort of on a different level too, one of the things that's like really been awesome to see for me, that's been, something I guess we hope for and has exceeded expectations, is the level of engagement on the other end of the spectrum of people who are completely new to minis gaming. Like seeing people do their own terrain who are like, I've never made terrain before and I'm making 2 entire tables for Legion, or
and
like,
some impressive stuff.
Yeah,
someone did like a whole crate dragon buried in sand and they're like, this is my first terrain piece. And I'm like, whoa.
Or painting for the very first time because of Legion. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's been really cool to see. Like people getting into minis gaming for the first time ever because of Legion. Because Star Wars is awesome and they're inspired by that IP. They love it and they, are just feel compelled to try their hand at painting and try their hand at terrain building, which are sometimes daunting tasks. So that's been really awesome to see, that sort of engagement among people who are new and more casual.
Yeah, and I had that happen to me at Adepticon. People would come up and tell me how much they were enjoying painting or building terrain, like the hobby side of things. And one person was like, yeah, it's like my Zen meditation. I just sort of zone out and paint. I'm like, yeah, I can relate to that. If you can get into hobby work, you kind of focus in on that, and it is sort of meditative in that way. So yeah, it's been really cool. I think it's opened new doors for some people, and for other people, they were just kind of like poised and ready for this to hit, hit the ground running. Like as soon as the game was announced, you had people crafting entire plans for like a whole battle table or more. So people were waiting for this game for a long time, I think, or at least a game like this in the Star Wars milieu, if you will.
Kids need their Star Wars.
Yeah,
they need that.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting time right now to be involved in Legion. You guys just previewed Clone Wars a week or so ago at Adepticon. While we're talking about the hobby aspect of the game, can you just talk about like where you're going with the modeling and the sculpting and the hard plastic and all that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Kylie complimented me earlier on the stuff we announced today, and like I know that stuff gets passed along to our sculpting team, and they put a lot of work into what they do, and they've noticed that people are complimenting and noticing that, like, as we do each wave, it seems to get, it gets better and better, really.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the great things about Fantasy Flight is they hire really talented people, and really talented artistic people don't stop getting better once they have a position. So, the sculpting department just keeps improving. They keep learning. They keep trying new approaches. And yeah, I think that it just continues to pay off. Like every single wave looks better than the last one, in my opinion. And we're getting into some really cool, interesting stuff now with dewbacks and tauntauns and that kind of silhouette. I think is really exciting.
Yeah,
for an army that you're collecting to have all this variety.
No, and that's Star Wars for you. It's
totally
variety. No, and you can tell too. Like, our sculptors, like, they love working on it.
Mhm.
Like our sculptor Rob was ecstatic to work on dewbacks.
Yes.
Like, he
Any
knows
alien
more
thing.
of like behind the scenes like facts about dewbacks
Yep.
now than probably anyone on
Yep.
Earth.
Well, he seeks out like all kinds of resources you wouldn't necessarily even think of from like
right,
1970s magazines that detail the costumes and like old
right, or like old props and
old
stuff.
prop databases. And like he trained as thinking he would do sort of digital animation for movies and stuff. So he has this kind of film background.
That's Corey too.
Corey too, yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys in our sculpting.
Yeah, so they sort of know, they kind of are also not only interested in sculpting an accurate depiction of, you know, whatever Star Wars element, they're also interested in like, well, how did this armor come to be? How did this particular creature come to be? And they'll figure out how they did it on a large scale, which kind of informs them, oh, well, this was some sort of, you know, fur thing that they, you know, stapled to a saddle, and that's why it looks like this. That gives them a sense of what it actually is in, you know, in the real world as a real prop, and then they can translate that into the digital sculpt as well. So that's been really interesting to see how incredibly deep they dive on some of this stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think the other thing we've improved on, and you've seen this, is pose work too. And I think that really started to like, you really saw that in wave, the Rogue One wave. So like the Pathfinders and the Death Troopers have more variety in sort of like their poses. You know, they're more tactical, they're more dynamic, and we've, you know, continued to push that going into the Clone Wars and stuff. You know, that's something that the sculpting manager, Derek, is very conscious of. Like Bosk, for example, has a great pose where it's sort of, he kind of has an S to him, kind of how he's standing a little bit. It's sort of a reptilian sort of arch in his back a little bit. And yeah, so that's definitely, something that we always look towards. So I don't know. I just look for it to get better and better, I guess.
Yeah, having seen what is coming, I can just say with utmost confidence, Legion is going to look really, really cool in the next couple of years.
So you mentioned the tauntauns and the dewbacks and all the artistic elements. Would like to now detour a little bit more towards where these units kind of fit into, I guess, the broader constellation of Legion's design. So I wonder if you could speak to the role you see these units filling, how sort of their mechanics came to be.
I can talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, take it away. Luke did most of the work on Wave 5, which is the Shore Troopers, Rebel Veterans, dewbacks, tauntauns, Bosk, and Sabine.
Yeah, so from the get-go, and people have noticed this a little bit, it's sort of this kind of a, I don't know, tauntauns are Rebel speeder bikes, and a dewback is an Imperial ATRT, a little bit, but I think that was just sort of an initial...
broad strokes,
exactly,
perhaps.
That was sort of an initial starting point, but then it diverged from there. And so, I don't know, designing for Legion is this, I don't know, it's kind of a weird balance. Tell me if you feel this way too, Alex. It's this weird balance of like, you know, things we want to do mechanically sort of to like give factions sort of their identity, mixed with this sort of like, well, it's in Star Wars, so we got to do it, you know, and we got to do it justice. So,
well, and then there's those sort of areas of creativity that open up to us that aren't exactly something that we see in Star Wars, but that's been sort of extrapolated on. And what I mean by that is like, even starting with the ATRT, but I think in particular the Land Speeder, which of course is an iconic Star Wars vehicle. It's Luke's Land Speeder. It's one of the first things you see on a planet in the films. But the way that we've kind of reimagined it is like, well, what if you didn't have access to too many resources, but you still needed to fight against an evil empire? How would you go about, you know, kind of jerry-rigging some sort of solution to that? And then I think also the Tauntauns, obviously we see Luke and we see Han out on patrol as scouts. Han at one point dismounts and you know, fires a pistol from kind of a dragoon situation, but you never really see like Pistolero,
right? So you have to extrapolate,
riders,
right?
Like cowboying it up, And I think that was really cool to just be like, well, if you did have these creatures, how might you use them in a like scouting battlefield kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just like how sweet would it be to have cowboy looking pistol wielding
it'd be
rebel
awesome.
dudes on giant snow lizards.
Well, and actually, I mean, to be fair, rule of cool definitely comes into play a lot.
Absolutely.
No, I think
I mean, rule of cool drives so much of Star Wars.
that's true.
Like so much of that. All those films are just like, well, why is this happening? Because it looks awesome and is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
No other reason. Like it's pretty much most of Jabba's palace.
Yeah.
Why this? Because it's gonna be awesome.
It's true. Well, I mean, and then how do Tauntauns and Dewbacks fit into
mechanically, because we are designing a game here.
Right. They look awesome. We have to do them. But I think they actually played into it pretty easily because, I mean, the Tauntauns are, the Rebels kind of needed something that could alpha strike a little bit and flank a little better. And, they don't have much access to range 4 weapons. And Tauntauns don't have that, but they do have speed that, Rebel vehicles don't usually have, or Rebel support units. And then the Dewbacks, it was kind of a natural fit too, because the Empire tends to be more tanky, absorb more hits, and so that fit with the Dewbacks. We played that up a little bit. But I don't know. It was sort of a balance of like, they should do a thing that fits the faction, but also like, let's just represent these how they should feel in the game.
And I also think they bring something, not necessarily new to the table, but something important to the table, which is more potent melee options.
Right.
I think that a big part of the eventual game of Legion is going to be this really interesting balance between, well, how many melee units do I need to bring? Because what if I run into a bunch of Tauntauns? What if I run into Vader? What if I run into Dewbacks or, what have you, Royal Guard, Wookiees, whatever. The more sort of interesting melee stuff is in the game, the more that becomes a dynamic tactical part of a standard game of Legion. I think we're already seeing that a little bit more with Royal Guard and Wookiees. I know that I saw a lot of those units at Adepticon. I think part of that was because they're effective units, but I also think that part of that is that they're an effective counterpoint to powerful pieces like Luke. And I think Tauntauns, Dewbacks, that's just another option in that realm, and I think that's going to change up people's strategies as well.
Yeah, so actually that's a fair point, because those units could have been designed just with a more ranged focused role in mind, but we intentionally played up their melee capabilities. One, because that gives you a melee option in a slot that there's not a melee option for now, and so it fleshes out like more of what you can do if you really want a fully fledged melee focused army.
Yeah, the only slot that does not have a real melee capability is heavies.
Well, and core units, I would say, but
yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's fine.
That's fair.
But at the same time, too, it also gives players more ways to field them, because if a stripped down melee only option is viable, say for the Dewback,
right?
Like,
which I think
that's
is
an option. That's another viable option, and then you add in the different gun options, and it multiplies, what the unit is capable of doing. And I think that drives a lot of design philosophy is, we design a lot of options, not necessarily with like each of these is like the best, or like we just designed the one that's the best. We, give players a lot of options to experiment with, and hopefully they're mostly lateral decisions where a player may choose one or the other based on the role that they want to play and their own personal play style. So, for example, the Dewback has a whole bunch of different guns, and putting, one gun on there versus another, say the flamethrower versus the range 4 weapon, that significantly changes what you're going to do with that. Or even if you field it with no gun.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And Relentless is a nice option because that's going to have extra utility with a gun, but is not required.
Yeah, Relentless is gross.
It's good. I mean, there's a reason it's only on 3 different plus 3 units at this point.
It's true. Yeah.
That's strong ability.
Yeah, we did fool around with it not having Relentless at all as an option on there, where it just had Charge. But then in that situation, we found that you really weren't using the ranged weapons at all. Yeah. When you could just move again and get into melee, why would you even shoot? So
I think the trick is that their ranged weapons are solid, but not overwhelmingly strong.
No, I mean the Tauntaun one is quite good.
It is,
but it's only range 1 to 2.
But yeah, and it just lets you choose the tool for the job.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you want to be in melee, sometimes you want to be skirting the edges, doing a little more ranged work. So it's cool. I think they're really flexible. I think they look great, just in terms of the miniatures. So I think we will see quite a few of those.
So wow, that was a ton of great insight, and just thank you for being so forthcoming with that. Now we saw an article drop today about the shore troopers. People are super excited about that. Can we hit the shore troopers and the rebel veterans? I know these are unreleased units. Obviously, you can't give away too much, but do you think you could take us through a similar walk through your philosophy behind these units and what roles you see these new cores filling?
Yeah, we can do that a little bit. I think the only thing
Good timing on that announcement, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. This is great for.
Did not realize it was going to drop today.
No, I think the only thing that really hasn't been spoiled about those guys is exactly how that detachment works,
right.
The separate gun. So we'll sort of keep that under wraps a little bit. But I know people have been asking a lot, trying to figure out what rank it is.
Mm.
And I made a comment on the 5th Trooper about running an army that had a particular group of units in it. And I mentioned that I had 3 E-Webs.
Uh-huh.
So I think you can put 2 and 2 together that these detachments are not supports.
Right.
And it'd be weird for us to give them no rank. So, I think people can figure out what rank they are.
Yeah, and that's yet another option in terms of what sort of foundation do you want to build your army on? I think that's one of the reasons it's important to have a lot of core choices to choose from, because I think for a very long time after the game was released, if you're rebels, you're like, oh, well, I'll just bring rebel troopers with Z6s. That's my core.
Right.
3 of those. Done. Stormtroopers.
Or 6.
Or 6 or whatever. Or like stormtroopers with DLTs.
Yeah.
And sometimes you brought them without guns. Maybe once in a while you brought one of the other weapons. But I think, snowtroopers helped make that a little more interesting, as did fleet troopers. And I think shore troopers and rebel troopers even more so, because they're the sort of more, they're the elite end of your basic soldier.
Right.
More highly trained, more efficacious, more expensive. So you can really kind of start your army with 3 core choices based on what you want that group of units to be doing. Do you want a cheap filler so that you can bring more elite special forces stuff, or do you want a more viable basic unit to be able to kind of handle themselves in the way that rebel veterans and shore troopers can, with better attack dice, more?
Yeah. So and to that point, some of the design philosophy behind them was the points difference between the rebel troopers, and then to their next upgrade, the fleet troopers, same with the stormtroopers, to the snowtroopers have been sort of this 1 point per mini, upgrade. And so we wanted to continue that. And I think a design philosophy we both had is keep the core unit simple.
Yes.
They're
not
sort of the backbone
difficult
of your army.
To play, straightforward.
So part of from the get-go with the shore troopers and the rebel veterans is to just slightly increase their stats. The shore troopers roll the same defense die, but they have a black die for offense. So they sort of break that, mold of the Imperials have slightly worse offense. And then similarly with the rebels, they didn't change their die. They kept just their white with a surge save, but they upgraded to black with a surge for offense, similar to, that's what the rebel commandos roll. And then from there, it was a matter of sort of giving them one other little. Well, I should back up. The other thing they have is access to training. That was also a very from the get-go. It was not a huge difference, because we're trying to keep it within this just small points increase. That's something that's not a huge substantive difference, but it gives you different army building options. And then from there, it was coming up with a interesting keyword for each. And again, keep it simple. So the rebels playing into dodge tokens, Imperials playing into aim tokens. But then the complicated part was designing those detachments. And sort of the genesis of that was
that was the sculpting.
Yeah, our sculpting manager Derek was like,
manager.
"We got to do that Koth gun. Like, it's too cool. We can't. This is our only opportunity to do it." We're like, "All right, fine, Derek. We'll do it. We'll figure out how to make it work." So that definitely took some testing. And then for the shore troopers too, we're like, all right, well, we're doing this sort of parity between Rebels and Imperials, at least in terms of like what rank options we give them. Not necessarily gameplay, but rank options. So we're like, all right, we're going to do something for them, of course. There was no obvious thing, so we threw in some ideas. And we're like, well, we did make up this mortar launcher for the ATST. There's no reason someone couldn't put that on the ground and fire it. So we went with that. And and then that sort of evolved into this. I think the articles have hinted at they have some sort of fire support capability. And then on the troopers, then the shore troopers and the rebel veterans, we needed something that sort of like helped solidify the pairing between the two, that you wanted one with the other, hence the coordinate keyword that they have. And what's fun then is that those actually translated very well to how we want to design the clones and the droids.
Yeah, and I will say too, that's another, the shore troopers and rebel veterans in particular are another example of seeking inspiration from the source material. Both of those units are seen in a very defensive role, essentially defending a base, particularly the Battle of Hoth. That's obviously a gritty last line of defense while the rest of the force evacuates. And then, of course, the shore troopers are protecting an incredibly important Imperial installation.
I thought they were just on vacation.
Well, you're thinking of the Jimmy Buffett troopers.
Oh, right.
Actually, those ones are mostly posted to Margaritaville, as I recall.
Yeah, that's right. We're still working on this.
Yeah, that's probably several waves.
We shouldn't talk about that.
We can't talk anything more about that. We've already said too much. But they're defensive. So emplacement troopers are something that we created already. We wanted to find a way to support those.
Yeah, we wanted to do more of those.
That was always something we wanted to do more of and do more to support. So it sort of became natural to tie all those disparate elements together. And what you end up with is a more elite trooper that can be more defensive, that does require a little bit more hands-on use in terms of they really shine when they're actually issued order tokens.
Yeah, they want those order tokens.
Which is something we also wanted to do for core units. Like, hey, maybe they should care about this and get a further benefit from getting orders. So I think that all kind of came together into the package that is the shore troopers and the rebel veterans. And I think they make for a different style of play. And they're very interesting in that regard.
Yeah.
And yeah, as Luke was saying, that sort of set the stage for a lot of the stuff we ended up doing with the clones, because it's one thing to have fire support on a little emplacement, contribute its shots to a pool of attack dice, but it's quite another thing when you have an entire army that's capable of that.
The fire support on the clones is
really good. It's tricky to use it really well, and it takes a lot of setup, but it can really push through a terrifying amount of damage. And what it lets you do is it lets you break through hard cover. It lets you, maybe catch a Jedi flat-footed without a dodge token and truly punish that unit. It basically allows you to pool your firepower into one more devastating attack. And if you can do that at the right time, that can be very, very potent indeed.
What's also great too for units who are possibly going to go down before they can activate. You just go ahead and get it off with another unit. You combine their shot into another one.
Yeah, and it makes stragglers much more useful. Suddenly, if you have a unit of just 2 troopers left or 1 trooper, at least they can chip in a little bit in terms of combining those dice, whereas otherwise you'd probably just be bowling for crits or trying to grab objectives or do something else with that unit.
Yeah, so it was sort of funny that so fire support, and then along with coordinate, the other. Just to clarify, yes, we are saying that the emplacements that come with the shore troopers and the rebel veterans have the fire support keyword.
Oh yeah, because I didn't read the articles yet.
It's okay. There's nothing. They don't know anything else about it. They know how many points it is. I think they know is the upgrade slot. Is that, do you know, guys, is that on there? Can people see that?
For which one? The emplacements?
Well, so the emplacement card isn't actually on the article at all.
Yeah, it's just like a little, it's
funny.
like underneath it, so you can see like you can see how many points it is, and like that it has 3 weapons. But
I think people have figured out at least that it's a separate thing at this point.
Right. So. But anyways, so we're just spoiling right now. They have the fighter support keyword on them that you saw.
Yeah,
on the
there you go.
Yeah.
Little spoiler.
There.
All right.
But it was just serendipitous that
it worked
keyword
out.
That we came up with, fire support for these emplacements, worked amazingly well for a base keyword for the clone troopers. Mm-hmm. They played into their theme, their strategy, and then similarly the coordinate keyword that was added to the shore troopers and the rebel veterans to create that synergy with the emplacement was the perfect keyword for what we wanted to do with the battle droids. Where, they do not perform as well if they're not given orders. However, they have this daisy chain effect where you don't need to order every single one. As long as you order one of them, they sort of as a group are given orders.
Yeah, for sure. And the Legion's funny like that. It just sort of builds on itself.
Yeah, well, and I think credit where credit is due. I have to say, like, as a developer for Legion, one of the best things has been like the system that Alex came up with, where so much of it is keyword based, and you can just sort of, in a lot of situations, just copy paste and Frankenstein stuff together and be like, this gunslinger keyword on Han Solo is sweet. Sabine should have that too. And there you go, done. You're, most of the way done with Sabine. Well, not most of the way, but yeah. So it's a very good system for, reusing elements. I think sometimes it might, and certainly at this point in Legion too, it can seem a little daunting. Looking at that 68-page rule book and be like, I gotta know all these rules. It's like, it's not really. You only need to know the keywords in your own army, and within a faction, you're going to see a lot of the same keywords over and over. So,
and you're not going to see all of them at once,
right?
Like, there's no way that you can construct an. I mean, I'm sure that someone like Nick Freeman or Kyle might pick up and run with the idea of like, what is the mathematical most keywords that you can get into an 800-point army list?
No, I bet Discord could figure that out.
Yeah, someone's going to figure that out. But regardless, it's not that high.
Right.
It's manageable, even if you get the most number of them possible into a single list, because you can't play with the whole everything that's been released at the same time. So I think that helps quite a bit. I'm happy to hear you say that as a developer, because part of the way that I designed Legion was very deliberately as hopefully a kindness to future developers, because I worked on first edition X-Wing for 6 years, 5-6 years. A long time. And I could just watch that design space erode away before my eyes. So one of the things with Legion is it does have a lot of little levers you can pull. It does have a lot of different ways that you can build on the core rules. And that's absolutely by design, because I am very hopeful that this game is going to be around in 10 years, longer. And for that to be a realistic possibility, you have to have room to grow. And you have to have a big foundation. And I think we've pretty much barely scratched the surface. Like every wave we kind of keep thinking of new things. And by going to new factions too, I mean, you can do the same thing in a different way, and it is still interesting because it brings new tactics to play. And then you start getting all the myriad possibilities of, well, this faction versus this faction, what does that look like? So I think just as more things come out, I think it gets more intriguing in terms of what kinds of games you're going to actually see on the tabletop.
So speaking of keywords, there were a lot of new keywords on the shore troopers and the veterans, and also on the dewbacks and the tauntauns. Can you talk about?
There's not that many new keywords.
It was. What do you think it was? Do you think it was an unusually keyword-rich wave? Do you think it's what? So okay, here let me quiz you, Luke.
All right, what?
What do you think the wave with the most new keywords in it is?
I think probably wave 2, where you get where you get Han and Boba and the scouts and the commandos, and then the 2 emplacements.
Yeah, you're probably
the 2 new emplacements, because we came up with new the emplacements have all new keywords, plotting and reposition.
You're right. It's wave
Sentinel.
2.
Yep, and then
it's wave 2
the
for
saboteurs had to have 2 different. Yep.
Oh, not only new keywords, but like a whole big section in the rule book.
Yeah, area effect weapons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
2 for
that was a
sure.
tangent. Kyle, what was your actual question?
Oh, well,
Oh, yes, there's some keywords.
I was just curious if you
What
could
do they
talk
do?
about any of those fancy new keywords.
Yeah. Well, I think people can see all of them in the article except for the ram keyword because it's a weapon keyword, so it's only visible on the back of the tauntaun. But I will say this: it does reward you for going as fast as possible.
Yeah,
So
getting into the tauntauns are all about moving.
Yeah,
they're all about being a speedy cavalry unit.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's interesting. I'll talk about agile because that was an interesting one. It's pretty simple on paper, but it is. I know a lot of people have been comparing tauntauns to speeder bikes, and justly so. And speeder bikes do suffer a little bit from a sharpshooter being a hard counter to their one cover. However, they always have it, whereas tauntauns
only have those dodge tokens if they go first. So right, it's a higher number. Yeah, and you know, in some ways more powerful, but you need to keep moving and you can't get caught flat-footed.
Right. So if you can activate before tauntaun unit has managed to double move, which it obviously will, you get the opportunity to fire at it with pretty much no defenses. Because the other thing that I know Alex mentioned before, that creature troopers don't gain any cover from having suppression tokens, and yet they still take them.
They're too big. They can't get behind incidental pieces of terrain. They can't throw themselves flat. They can't
that mechanic
take cover the way that an infantryman
that
can.
Mechanic represents just sort of ducking down.
Correct.
So trying not to get hit.
But getting shot is still nerve-wracking. It still is going to affect your abilities.
Tauntauns don't like being shot at.
No. I mean, they are apparently war-trained, but nonetheless.
Only so far. They've got 2 courage.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you still have to play with the panic mechanic.
Yeah, so they can still be suppressed.
You don't get that sort of infantryman benefit.
Didn't I panic some of your tauntauns off of the board in one game?
Yeah, they're very fast. So if
they do panic, it's not good.
Start to run. Well, I think didn't you drop my commander too? I think it was a whole.
I think it was
a whole chain of unfortunate events.
Was the game where I was playing
correctly.
Three shore troopers, 3 of the mortars.
Oh yeah, that was just Suppression City, wasn't it?
3 E-webs, 3. Yep. No, not 3 death troopers.
Yeah, that was. So we do stress tests of the rules as you should, and one of the ones that we were trying was like, how many suppressive weapons is too many?
And just weapons in general.
And the Empire can do a lot. You can have almost all suppression weapons. Yeah, but I think it's very manageable. I don't remember how that game turned out, but I know it wasn't a total. It wasn't total annihilation.
And that was one of the things.
I mean,
poorly for
my
Alex.
tauntauns ran away. I don't remember who won.
It wasn't like an absolute shutout.
Yeah, it was pretty reasonable.
But we did see some tauntauns run away.
Yes. It was a tactical retreat.
They'll
be back.
But yeah, you get Krennic in there.
They just wanted to build up some momentum for that ram keyword.
Exactly. Yeah. Gotta one direction, stop and run the other direction.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I sent them off the board, I think, 5 or 6 months ago.
Oh, they're on their way back now?
In 6 months or so, they're going to come onto the table during one of our games, and they're going to destroy your entire army.
Hypersonic speed.
That's right. It's going to be like that scene in Last Jedi.
Sounds about right. Yeah, so I guess going back on track, I don't know, what other keywords could we talk about on there?
Critical's a good one to talk about.
Critical's all new.
Very simple.
I forgot about that.
All it does is let you change X surge results into crit results, which is very useful. And it's especially interesting when you splash that keyword into units that don't have surge, either on the offense specifically. So if you use fire support, for example, to throw a weapon into the pool that has critical, say with shore troopers and their accompanying mortar, all of a sudden you've actually increased your offense potential, not only by the extra dice that you're adding, but any surge you roll now can be turned into, or at least a couple of surges that you roll, depending on how much critical you have, can be turned into hits. And that's going to take your offensive ceiling even higher. So that's a fun keyword, especially when you're talking about combined dice pools.
Yeah, it was an interesting one that I don't remember necessarily what the genesis of it was, but I think when I hit on it, it became a sort of like, oh, this seems sort of obvious. Like, yeah, things don't normally surge to crit, but what if it can in a limited capacity?
Well, I think I remember how this happened. I think what happened was the mortar teams.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So here I remember exactly how this happened because the mortar teams had surge to crit at one point.
Yes, because they only roll a few. I mean,
they only roll 3 dice.
We'll just keep spoiling stuff.
Yeah, sure. It's three white dice.
It's right? It's 3 white dice.
Yeah, it's like the ATST mortar.
Yeah, exactly.
So for a while they had surge to crit, and that was fine when the mortar was firing on its own. But I was like, well, this kind of disinclines me to add this pile of dice to a unit of short troopers because I'm actually reducing the effectiveness of those dice. I'm adding 3 white dice without surge. Is there a way that we can not lose the benefit of surge to crit if you're adding it to a unit that doesn't have it?
Right.
And so I think that was the genesis of, well, we can just make it a weapon keyword. And then, not only do we have the ability to add surge to crit to units on sort of a limited basis, but we can also control the amount. And then you don't get into a situation where just because this auxiliary thing is adding to the dice pool, it hasn't turned all of your surges into crits in the way that sort of frag grenades does. It's a way that we can do it in a more controlled fashion. So I think that was pretty much, that was a pretty classic like Luke and I bit of design back and forth, because we're able to sort of zero in on what we like and don't like about each other's designs and sort of come up with these kinds of solutions to it.
Yeah, well, and I think part of the reason I think it really took off too, you're going to see it in the future. We'll just say that. It's a very useful keyword to put on things.
Critical?
Yeah, critical.
Yeah, it is.
But it's this interesting sort of, it's simultaneously better and worse than impact in a weird way. It's not guaranteed, but a crit up front is better than a crit later. A crit up front will get you through cover.
I'd gladly pay you Tuesday for a critical today.
I see. Well, you only have a 1 in 8 for those. Well, I guess 1 in 4 if you count the natural one.
True.
But it was useful too because it also was a soft counter to dodge tokens.
Yeah.
Which dodge tokens are
dodge
very powerful.
and heavy cover. It gives you a reason to lob a mortar shot because now you're rolling 3 dice. Each of them has a 1 in 4. You have a decent chance of rolling a crit. And then even if you don't, it's suppressive.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that helps make it a little bit more of a threat, even if you are all tokened up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good too on units that don't surge at all, because then you're like, oh, I don't feel so bad when I roll surges now.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's part of, not to get too deep into Clone Wars design philosophy, but that's a lot of what happens in the Clone Wars too. Like, I know that in terms of the clone and droid armies, I deliberately steered clear of surges in general on offense and defense, so that when you do add the capability of getting those surge either through the new surge token or a keyword like critical, it's all the more important.
Right.
And I think that's fun design space to play in. I think we started doing that in this wave, but I think we really started digging into it more in the Clone Wars factions.
Yeah.
So can you talk just a little bit more? I mean, you talked about fire support and coordinate, but can you talk a little bit more about the Clone Wars factions and the design philosophy behind them?
Well, yeah, I think just to expand on it just a tiny bit more without getting too spoilerific, it's like Legion building itself up. It's seeing the utility of keywords like fire support and coordinate, and seeing what you can do with slightly tweaked trooper types, because we've now seen creature troopers, we've seen emplacement troopers, you're going to see clone troopers and droid troopers as well. And that's just a chance to shade the standard trooper template in a slightly more interesting way. I mean, being a clone trooper has its uses. It's better than being just a regular trooper. They are trained together. They are of the same genetic material. Their whole life is bent towards one goal. And so they have this sort of unparalleled teamwork and, ability to understand how each other are thinking. And that expresses itself through game mechanics like being able to share surge tokens and dodge tokens and aim tokens and even standby tokens. They're watching each other's back much more closely than the normal trooper is capable of doing. And that's also expressed through, all the clones having fire support. So they work together and they work as sort of one unit, much more so than a group of disparate individuals from all over the galaxy do.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe just to clarify for people too who hadn't watched whose interview were you on Adepticon? Was that Fifth Trooper?
I was on Fifth Trooper, and I also just did a panel.
Yeah. So for people who haven't listened to that,
anybody's questions,
the clone trooper subtype allows you to spend the surge, dodge, aim, or standby tokens.
Yeah, all green tokens.
Other friendly clone trooper units at range 1, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's great. I mean, it means you can take a dodge even if you don't think that unit's going to be shot at. It means if you roll well, you can choose not to use the aim token and save it for a friend. It means if you have a single surge token in the middle of a bunch of different clone units, anybody who rolls a surge on defense or offense can benefit from that. It really, it's no wasted tokens. A lot of the times you will throw a token up, and if it doesn't get used by the end of the round, it just gets wasted.
Yeah.
With clones, it is very rare that you ever have a squandered sort of token action. So that's a lot of fun. And then coordinate was a perfect, as we discussed before, keyword for the droid army, where it's like, if they're not getting orders, they're kind of falling apart. But if they are, they're all the same programming. They have a linked neural network of sorts. They all know what the plan is, as long as that plan is actually transmitted.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that, of course, is we needed to create a new keyword that was like, well, if these guys don't get expressly told what they should be doing, they have no idea what's going on. They'll probably just shoot at stuff in a sort of haphazard fashion.
And,
and
I think you get to enjoy the sirens in the background too here.
Yeah, welcome to Downtown Minneapolis podcast listeners. We got the dulcet sounds of the Final Four fans yelling in the street. We've got ambulances trying to push their way through Final Four traffic.
Fun times.
It's real urban living here, Luke.
Yes, it's true.
The heart of the city.
The sounds of sirens.
Yeah, the sounds of sirens, exactly. I don't know. I guess a little more backstory on the Clone Wars wave. We were talking earlier about how Alex was helping out with X-Wing 2.0, getting that off the ground. He came out of Legion retirement to work on.
I did. I took a little hiatus and let Luke run the show.
Exactly. Well, we tested everything together, and like we said, we always iterated it.
I was never fully gone.
Yeah, so really, you give Alex credit for all the new faction stuff. But,
give me credit for everything.
Well, but except for this, I do have to say, I gave just two very, I think, substantive contributions to Wave 6 that I'm pretty proud of, and one was the AI keyword for the droids.
Yeah, that was smart.
Just like, you know what? This is the one thing I want to see on these guys.
Yep.
Make them dumb. If they're not
dumb is it. They need to be dumb, and they need to be bad, and there needs to be a lot of them.
So
they need to be efficacish on the tabletop.
Right. Yes.
I think we got there.
Yeah, I think we did achieve that. And then the other thing too was the clone keyword of sharing because you had given them the clone trooper subtype. For basically future use as like, I
wanted to do something
issues
with it,
orders only clone troopers or something.
It was. Yeah.
So I was like, Alex, you can't just make a keyword with no rules attached to it.
And I was like, watch me, Luke. You know my life.
So I actually, it was kind of fun. We actually asked our testers for ideas.
Yeah, that's right.
They gave us some interesting ones, and we I read through those and synthesized them, and was like, you know what? How about they just can share tokens? So.
And it worked great. Like we tested it, and it was like, yeah, this is it. Done.
I love playing with clones.
Yeah,
because it has this subtle wrinkle to it where you don't feel like you're wasting tokens. It makes you make interesting decisions of like, I want to keep these guys together. And
standby is so much more important. You have a small activation army, and so you need something like a standby token that's going to be more useful.
Standby is very interesting, being able to share that token, letting one thing standby so that something else can use it.
One of the big problems with standby is taking suppression and losing it, but you can have a unit of clones behind full cover, still watching out for their battle brothers,
right,
with that standby
behind line of sight.
Absolutely. And that's super handy.
Yeah, it turns out.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe to go back to your question a little bit from a broader perspective, I think what you're generally going to see is that the clone army is they're elite units, even more so than the Empire. I think the Empire is this sort of like
the Empire is durable. They're not necessarily going to put a lot of hurt out.
Right. They're more elite than, say, your average rebel trooper, but they're expendable. Yes. Clones are expendable too, but man,
only to a point, though.
They are so much more trained.
And then, it hurts a lot more when you lose a clone trooper.
Right, it does.
Because
it hurts a lot.
They're much stronger, and you have so few of them.
Yeah, and then I think you're going to see that in other ways in the faction too, where their special forces are only going to be even more elite. Their heavies are going to be similar to the Empire, where it's sort of bigger machinery and that sort of thing. I already see with the Bark Speeder, it's sort of like it's a beefy speeder bike.
Yep.
And then with the droid army, obviously, Horde army comes to mind, but it's mainly sort of a Horde army, I think, in spirit more so. I would classify it as a min-max army, because on one end of the spectrum you have these battle droids that are dirt cheap, but on the other end of the spectrum, like, your commanders are generally going to be pretty expensive for unique characters. General Grievous is not cheap.
The few we've designed so far are very elite. Which is an interesting contrast to their
Droidicas too.
Grinds. Droidicas are strong, strong and expensive.
Yeah, so I think you're going to see a lot of min-maxing with the Separatist army, and then with the Republic army, it's going to be a lot of elite guys where you're fewer activations, but they really count. They really hit harder.
And from a hobby perspective, I think the clones are going to be a great intro army. Don't have to paint a lot of guys. They are in armor with closed helmets, so that is a nice, straightforward paint scheme. So I'm hopeful that a lot of people get into the game through the new core set and get into the hobby through the new core set, because I think that the Clone Warriors are going to be a very accessible force to start with.
Yeah, I think the new armies are a slight step up in complexity from the original two because of the droid mechanics, and because of the token sharing and the fire support, but they're not vastly different for sure.
No, but they're different enough that I think they're going to be an interesting addition.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's awesome. That was a lot. A lot to take in.
You feel free to jump in if we're ever
you guys can.
We're good.
We can babble.
Just keep talking. We'll hold out the mic, right? So, just to kind of that's a lot of really good information on the clones and the droid army. So, I guess kind of swinging it back to, this year and everything that's happened. We've also seen a lot of organized play. We've had LVO, we've had Adepticon, we've had the Nova Open, we've had Gen Con. We're going to have Worlds coming up, which I think everybody's really looking forward to.
I think that's going to be super cool. It's going to be a very small scale thing. I think people are going to get a very complete picture of things, since there's only eight people, right, at the whole tournament. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. You really get to know players on a individual basis. Will be very cool.
It's Legion All Stars.
It is. It's going to be interesting.
You're going to have Kyle there.
Yeah,
Kyle, and I think Nick Freeman is another prominent community voice. He's going to be there.
And some people I haven't
LJ, met and then and then a lot of people we've never met. So that'll be cool.
So I guess our next question kind of is geared towards, and this might not even be your guys' department, but are you guys in the conversation as far as what organized play is going to kind of look like next year, after Worlds, and kind of what the shape of things to come in that region of the spaces?
I'm going to mostly defer that to the organized play department, especially since they're under brand new leadership with some really exciting ideas. But I will say, organized play has always and will always tap the developers of each game to kind of get their input. We work together in terms of tournament rules. We work together in terms of what we want to see the game do. And I think that certainly we are on the same page in terms of the broad strokes of what we want in the future. And what we want is we want casual players, narrative focused players, and competitive players to all have great options for play. Some people just want to hone their game and be strategic masterminds. Some people just want to have fun stories happen in the Star Wars universe. And to me, a hobby game like Legion, that's the beauty of the game. It appeals to all kinds of different people because you can really take it in the direction that you want to take it. So I know that OP is going to be very dedicated to supporting all of those different play styles and philosophies. So that's why we have operations as well as competitive play. And I know that that is going to continue. As to the exact form that's going to take, I think I will leave that to organized play to announce on their own terms.
Yeah, well, and I think, I guess to be honest, don't know exactly what some of it is.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it is still being worked on. So I think actually that's a great point, because if you have a particular wish or vision or thought that you want to share with our organized play department, Alex Watkins is out there on Twitter, on Facebook, on our social media. I've seen some awesome stuff that the community has done. They are so open to feedback and to hearing what the community wants. They would be very, very pleased to hear from fans. So if you're out there, you have some particular vision for the future, let them know. Throw it out there.
Oh, they're going to hear
we'll
from
listen.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them
Will.
I sent you.
Alex
Yeah.
Davy sent me. The Sith Lord.
That's right.
I'm
That's
here at the
right.
Senate. I'm going to demand my vision for Star Wars. Exactly.
I am the Senate. Speaking of old memes,
Yeah.
that's what I got. That's what I got.
How do you feel about the current meta, speaking of organized play? Because I know that, of course, Alex, you're at Adepticon. You got to see what people are doing. What do you think about all that?
I think it's quite good for a young game. I think it's something that we always want to see, a diverse meta. I think that having players bring some unexpected lists. One of the best lists in the entire tournament did not feature Luke, and I think a lot of Rebel people think that every list begins with Luke Skywalker as the first thing you put in the list. So it's nice to see. I think they're wrong. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can
he is very
approach
good,
it. He's very good. I mean, Luke's not a bad choice by any means. But so I thought there was a decent amount of diversity. Obviously, I think that there's room for improvement. I think vehicles are going to feature a little more heavily after the Occupier hits tables and the Land Speeder hits tables.
And similarly, anti-vehicle.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful that it will just continue to remain a diverse and interesting meta. There's always going to be stuff, competitively speaking, that isn't reached for as frequently. But overall, I would say that for a young game, for a year into the game, I saw a lot of really cool options out there. And I saw people winning with very unique lists and play styles, and that is very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are taking to the kind of open terrain system as well. I think people are really deciding, hey, this is our opportunity to take this game to the direction that we want. I saw some really great tables at Adepticon, and I saw a lot of variety in terms of terrain, but I also saw a certain consistency from table to table. They all featured a lot of terrain, and they featured really interesting setups, and they featured what I felt was like a very balanced setup in terms of distribution. And that all happened pretty organically. We supplied, I think, some reasonable guidelines in the rules reference, but we also left it up to players and tournament organizers to kind of take the ball and run with it. And I think that what we saw was people's willingness to do that and people's ability to take it to the place that they want. And I think everybody was very happy with the terrain at Adepticon, which was a really cool thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's in a pretty good place, and I think that we want to keep it vibrant. We want to keep it interesting. We never want any one list or strategy or commander to dominate. So far, so good.
So let me ask you this. In all honesty, come on, give me your honest answer here, boys. Did you see a Sabs list going to Worlds? Did you see that happening?
Triple Sabs is a
no,
bit of a surprise.
That was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, I don't think they're bad.
No, they're very
it's
good.
It's a tough choice to take them over snipers.
Well,
so
I mean, both of those units are clearly very, very good.
yeah.
I did not expect triple Sabs. I did not. I thought that perhaps 1 or 2 Sab lists would show up.
Remind me who's
It
was
was
it? Who had
Daniel
triple Sabs?
Lupo.
Yeah, that list was crazy. And I think the cool thing about that list, I saw it in action a couple of times, nobody was expecting it. So nobody had any idea how to play against it.
Was he at LVO?
You know,
was.
people were like, wait, triple
He was-
saboteurs.
Was he playing? It's the Rebel Saboteurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Okay. Yep.
The
I remember him. Yeah.
Well, and
Better.
I think the other problem is not only is it saboteurs and you're not prepared for it, but he is just so darn good at it too.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be
Well-
like that's the interesting thing about war games, right? That's when you start seeing the sort of avant-garde strategies. Is when you see someone who knows the game down to the millimeter and is like, I think I see something here that
Oh.
nobody's exploiting yet,
Or you're
That's where it
just
gets
a
fun.
big troll,
or you're a huge troll.
like someone named Nick Freeman. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Is he though?
But no, I think it speaks. Yeah,
but I
well,
mean, like once you have something effective, like why not have some fun?
yeah. Well, and I think it speaks to the fact that you have to master the basics,
Yep.
and if you have those mastered, really, you can kind of make anything good.
Well, not only that, but there's an advantage to the element of surprise.
Right.
People practice for events, and they practice against and with primarily meta lists,
Right.
which is why, and like I've been looking at, I've been playing competitive games for a very long time, and I've always been kind of a Johnny Spike player, if you're familiar with that. That
Those
was sort of
archetypes.
that was an archetype sort of created to explain Magic the Gathering players. Johnny is a player who wants to win in a creative way, who wants to do something new. Spike is a player who just wants an efficient list or strategy or deck or what have you in order to win. And I'm somewhere in between there. But I think what's always really interesting is the advantage of a player who's going to do something novel is people do not necessarily know how to play against it, and that can be a legitimate competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So you can gain an edge through innovation.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool to see. That's all, I always respect that a lot, and I always think it's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been working on Fantasy Flight games for a long time too. So I've seen that in X-Wing, I've seen that in Armada. It always kind of tickles me when something bizarre ends up on a top table
Mm-hmm.
or in the final 8 or whatever. It's like, okay, I know this list and this list because I've seen it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I know these players are good with it. What the heck is this list?
It's like
all
playing
about?
a heartbeat in the top two.
Right? No, exactly. Yeah, like
That was a
we've seen it
Netrunner
in
reference.
Netrunner too, and I think that's fun. I always brought crazy X-Wing and Netrunner lists to tournaments that I went to, and I think that
Mhm.
it just gives you that little X factor that's a little bit.
But you got to be good with the list.
Well, yeah, you can't just bring.
You're going to
something-
go off meta. You got to be
It
good
has
at
to. Not only do you have to bring something that's plausible, but you have to know what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it.
So yeah, and then I think even like I was pleased to see multiple lists running the FD towers at LVO,
Yep.
and one of them being Kingsley's.
Mhm.
Like that was good to see a player who obviously like is just really keyed into just
Mhm.
fundamentals and just solid basic strategy,
well, LVO,
using something
LVO,
that
we saw,
a lot of people don't.
Yeah, LVO, we saw an undefeated Palpatine list, which then translated into a number of new Palpatine lists at Adepticon, because like people were like, "Oh, no,
I'm so
can-
happy to see people running Palpatine.
You can win with that." It's
Papa Palpatine.
Papa Palps, old Sheevy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's fun. He was a fun one to design. Yeah, so I think it's always cool to see something different, and I think that that kind of creativity is a big part of why people play this game and why
Mhm.
people play games in general. So that's always fun to see. I am really curious to see what the world finals is going to look like, because we
Yeah.
have a lot of different players and a lot of different lists.
Mm-hmm.
And are they going to keep the same thing, or are they going to mix it up?
I don't know.
It's going to be really fascinating, I think, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, what are I'm curious to ask you guys, what are your predictions for Worlds in terms of lists? I mean, you guys have like almost probably a better bead on the meta in some ways than we do, and we keep up on it, but we're not actually playing in the tournament. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys think your Worlds predictions are.
Well, I don't even know what I'm running at this point, but I think it depends on. I think it depends on, you know, when Worlds is. I don't think that's an entirely known quantity at the moment.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, if you get any hot tips, you know, let us know.
Hopefully, we'll find out soon. I think they're still putting the final details together, but we'll know more soon.
You know, because that'll depend on like what units are out. It looks like we may have, you know, obviously the new heavies, and then maybe Bosk and Sabine.
Definitely those.
Yeah,
possibly Bosk and Sabine, depending. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's gonna. I think so too.
Yeah, they're both pretty nasty. Sabine especially is very hard to delete.
Yeah, I think Bosk is more of he's sort of a Boba Fett side grade, poor man's Boba a little bit.
He's different though. I mean, he puts out suppression. He has very interesting.
Well, no. Don't get me wrong. He's different, but
and you always
fills
have
a similar role.
But I think with Boba or with Bosk and Sabine, you have that potential for a huge turn.
Right.
With docks and grenades and with explosions,
Mm-hmm.
I think you have this very interesting counter tool to mass activations, which we saw a lot of,
mm-hmm.
and we'll continue to see a lot of because more activations is powerful.
Right.
There's an inherent advantage there.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, but the both of the characters' bomb cards counter that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like
as do triple saboteurs.
I like how Mike and Kyle just totally glossed over Death Troopers. didn't even pause. I'm still salty about my rebels being completely wiped out to a man at range 4 by those focus fire deals.
Oh yeah, those
heavy
guys
cover, by the way.
DTs are no joke. I think DTs and Krennic are going to be another factor. Like, yeah, those were not available for Adepticon, and also even though Jin and Pathfinders were available, they were not out for long. So I think there was a lack of familiarity and comfort there, and I think as people play with them more, they'll be more comfortable taking them to tournaments. So I kind of expect one or the other of those units to be, hopefully, to be a presence at Worlds. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm pretty excited, you know, to see that sort of culminate the first year of at least Legion competitive play whenever that happens.
So, you know, this was just like a lot of information generally. Do you guys have any general thoughts on how you guys see the next year shaking out in a general sense, like where you're taking the game? You know, clearly we're headed to the Clone Wars, right? The prequel era, which is fantastic.
Yep.
You know, how do you guys want to kind of wrap up the conversation in regards to that?
Sure. I mean, I can just sort of jump into it because I think that we had an amazing year one, but I think y'all ain't seen nothing yet because we have not only we have so much in the camp, we have so much planned. I mean, one thing that's really gratifying is the studio is throwing its weight behind this game in a really big way. I mean, we are looking at new factions, and 4 is not the end in terms of new factions. We're looking at, you know, possible sub factions and just growing this game and offering better sculpts, better plastic, new things for people to get excited about. We're opening up the door to FFG terrain products with narrative components. The Down ATST is the start of that, but it's not only is it a really awesome looking terrain piece, it has a 2-part mission included. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to do. We want to really stretch and grow in every possible direction. So we, I think, are going to see an even bigger year than the year we just had, which was, I think, a bigger year than anybody expected. So the game is just kind of rocketing forward, and we're just going to see where it takes us.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'd just echo all of that. You know, a lot of people will say like, oh, you know, when are we doing this character? When are we doing this character? You know, will you ever do this character? I think the answer to that a lot of times is just hang in there, because, like, dude, like, we want to see all this stuff in this game too.
Oh, yeah,
like,
I mean,
we can only do so much at once. It's a long list of stuff that we want to make.
No, it's true. Like, we have our own personal approach to fandom, and we have our own personal things that we think are awesome.
Yeah,
and so that informs what we're doing. And we're also not going to forget about Rebels and Imperials. The game started in the Galactic Civil War era.
There's still so much we want to do for them.
Well, there's so much, and more happening all the time between comic books and
new
TV shows and all kinds of stuff. There's a whole new era we haven't even scratched the surface of. We haven't really tapped into the Clone Wars. Like, the scope of what we could do is immense.
Yeah.
And the good news is, I think we want to do a enormous amount of it. Like, we have,
but
we have truly grand plans.
As fast as we're putting stuff out, we can still only do it so fast. So,
yeah. So I think don't expect any flagging in the pace on this game. But I think eventually we'll get to this place where, not everybody has to buy everything, but eventually we'll get to this place where it's like, well, here's Star Wars. Here's this game of Star Wars tabletop combat. What appeals to me? What do I like? And I think it can get pretty pure. I think people will be fielding, off the top of my head, Gungan armies, or, like Geonosians, or specific sub-factions of the Empire. There's so much that we can do if the community sticks with it, and if this game is as big as I expect it to be. Stuff we will do, as big as it's on track to be. Exactly. It's not stuff that we could do. It's stuff that we will do. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Mic drop. So I did, thank you guys for coming on today. It's been, frankly, a real pleasure, I think, for us to be a part of the community that this game has generated, and to also be able to kind of have this relationship with you guys where we can, have you on and talk. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, definitely. No, we want to, thank you guys too, because you guys are helping drive this community as well. All of you guys, very much so. It's a pleasure meeting all of you guys in person at, LVO. That was great.
Adepticon too is really cool to interact with the fans, see where things are at and where things are going.
Yeah, definitely. It's great, and seeing people at Gen Con and then again at LVO too, like having familiar faces. So kudos to you guys too. You guys are a big part of this too. We make the game, but we got to keep a community going and get people hyped and, give them podcasts to listen to and blogs and, unit analyses and stuff like that. So shout out to you guys, really.
Yeah. Tabletop gaming, the beauty of it is the people that you meet and the fact that you get to actually interact with human beings face to face. I think that's what makes it so special. And what I'm saying is y'all are special. So thank you. not to get too sappy about it, but yeah, it's great. You guys are great. Things are great.
It is, yeah. It's great too that I'm just not on a podcast with some random strangers I haven't met before. I've met you guys.
I've seen these people in sports coats. Oh. They clean up all right. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy days. We know that you're slammed with all this new stuff. So,
well, it's our pleasure.
Happy to be here.
So that was our conversation with the Dark Lords of the Sith, Alex, Davy, and Luke Eddy from Fantasy Flight Games. The Notorious Scoundrels will be back again next week with the second part of the State of the Legion address.
Yeah, and the Fifth Trooper will have a pre-recorded episode where we go over the new units, the dewbacks and shore troopers, and of course talk about that amazing interview we just had.
It was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
Oh my God, so much.
Well, thank you everybody for listening today. We really appreciate, the last 6 to 8 months or so of Legion and being on this podcast. We're looking forward to the next year. Hope everybody has a fantastic week until we see you next week. May the Force be with you.